Hey, so just doing a little postural balance assessment test here for you. A little bit of experimentation. Many different standing postures we have. I'm going to start in a parallel posture. So my toes are pointing directly forward. My heels are straight down below the center of my hip joint. So pubic bone here, ASIS over here, and then the midpoint here is where my heel sits. It's an anatomical standing posture. And I'm going to just put my hands on the quads here and feel what the muscles are doing, what's happening in this area here. And then I bring my hands around the back to the hamstrings and just observing what's happening in the hamstrings. I'm going to come back to the front and let my weight come forward toward the toes, and then bringing my weight back toward the heels and noticing a very big difference between what happens with my toes bearing the weight of the body and when I come back and my heels are bearing the weight of my body. And I am moving between my neutral position, or my position of balance, toward a position of teetering toward the front, where the quads go soft, and teetering toward the back, where the quads engage and pull up, and I can feel the kneecaps pulling up with the VMOs. So if you're one of those people who has knee issues and who has especially problems with the VMO and the balance with the ITBs and the vastus lateralis, it's interesting to note whether you find yourself standing forward with the weight on the toes, where the quads are switched off in a very relaxed position, or whether you're standing with your weight back toward the heels, where the quads pull on like guy ropes, holding me, stopping me from going any further back, and particularly pulling up the VMOs and the kneecaps. And then if we bring our hands around to the back of the legs, to the hamstrings, and just noticing what happens to the hamstrings when the weight comes forward toward the toes, and what happens to the hamstrings as the weight comes back onto the heels. And we notice that as we go forward, the hamstrings engage and switch on and pull down the back of the legs. And as we bring the weight back toward the heels, the hamstrings soften and become inactive. Coming forward, I also notice whether both hamstrings switch on at the same time, and on the way back, whether they both switch off at the same time. And often, if coming forward, one hamstring switches on before the other, it's usually a pelvic rotation. So if I keep my pelvis rotated in one direction, I come forward, I notice that one hamstring comes on and the other one stays off. And then if I rotate my pelvis back in the other direction and come forward, now that situation has reversed. So we can see how rotations of the pelvis are going to affect how the hamstrings switch on. It'll also have an effect going forward or coming back of how the quads work. This one very tense, this one doing nothing, rotate in the other way, to the other direction. This one very tense, this one doing nothing. The pelvic rotation, very important in posture. Hips forward. And the positioning of the weight over the feet, that triangle that we talk about, base of the big toe, base of the little toe, back to the heels, balance, so that the muscles at the front of the legs and the muscles at the back of the legs are working harmoniously, sharing the load. There's not a bias of hamstring holding, which leads to hamstring tightness. There's not the burden of like I'm water skiing and holding on, trying not to fall over backwards with the big quads. So have a little play with that every day. Find the neutral plane for the feet and just experiment with the weight forward and the weight backwards, and then observe how you catch yourself in daily life, either forward or back, or do you find yourself right in the middle?